Okay, so our final invited speaker for the day is Oguzhan Gencoglu. So Oguzhan studied a PhD in machine learning at Tampere University in Finland. He's a co-founder and head of AI in startup Top Data Science, which is a startup doing AI as a service. And he's also the co-author or lead author of a recent paper on Harkside, which is the Harkside of deep learning, where HARK is meaning hypothesizing after the results are known. So, thanks very much, Oguzhan. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. First of all, thanks for joining. After these long days, you are still here. Basically, one of the final hours of the whole conference, and thanks for inviting me for this session. Yeah, my name is Oguzhan. I'm coming from research, but last few years I'm leading about 15 data scientists. We are not a product company, so we are good at solving problems with machine learning, and our clients are good at having problems. So that's what we do. But today I'll be talking about our paper, which I initiated because this whole concept have been bugging me for a while, and with some colleagues, with some clients actually from 8 different institutions. It just happened to be like that, from all over the world, some corporations, some startups, or some universities. We wrote this paper called Harkside of deep learning, and HARK means hypothesizing after the results are known, which I believe is pretty big deal, and I believe we are all unfortunately doing this one way or another. And basically the whole point of this paper is not to call out on a specific individual or an institution or a paper, but it's literally a criticism to us by us. So basically, who else would criticize us if we don't do it ourselves? So I have most likely done some of these in my papers. So the first thing that bugged me actually is that, have you ever realized in any of these top machine learning conferences and journals, it's pretty rare to see the phrase, our hypothesis, or even we hypothesize. I think this is really a big deal if we are claiming we are scientists, right? Because otherwise it becomes something else, which is all right. But if we claim we are scientists, we need to change our ways, I believe. So the problem is here, instead of starting from a traditional hypothetical deductive model, what we call the good old scientific method, based on either past knowledge, hardcore mathematics, or past conjecture, domain expertise, whatever, nowadays we researchers masquerade a hypothesis after seeing the results, a post hoc one, as if it has been an a priori hypothesis, if there's even a hypothesis in the paper. So harking can be due to construction of new hypotheses after the results are known, retrieving or suppressing hypotheses after the results are known. And it will be a bit weird to not have a hypothesis in a paper criticizing people not having hypothesis. So our hypothesis is that the speed of the whole deep learning research and groupthink of this whole community, due to financial success obviously, and hyper-competitive nature of the field, results in harking, hypothesizing after the results are known, and we believe it's worth to discuss. So there's no clear solution, but we believe we should discuss this. And I think implications are not yet fully explored, so we wrote this paper. Okay, let's talk about the first section of our paper. So we basically talked about the most powerful optimization algorithm known to mankind, Grad student descent. So I think rectified Adam nowadays has some nice stuff, but I still believe this is the most powerful one. So basically you start, instead of starting from a hypothesis, you get a bunch of graduate students, start from a baseline, often someone else's, apply some skip connections there and basically trial and error iteratively until you reach a, let's say, local optima, which is a publishable result. Then you forge an explanation. What the hell? And this results in difficulty of distinguishing what works, what not, right? And basically the negligence of comprehensive discussions of, okay, this was our hypothesis, this worked, this didn't work. This whole thing is just not there. I'm not talking about a couple of sentences, a serious analysis of, okay, looking back to our hypothesis kind of analysis. Second thing we have discussed is what we called state-of-the-art hacking, something similar to p-hacking in good old hacking. So state-of-the-art, what I mean is that if we are all familiar, but it's nice to reiterate, a method that outperforms all the previous methods in a certain metric, like accuracy or inference speed or training speed or whatever. We believe that harking, hypothesizing after the results are known, is more likely to be overlooked if you are reaching state-of-the-art. And in my humble opinion, SOTA, or state-of-the-art, is disproportionately promoted in our community. Some reasons, for example, having a marginally state-of-the-art result. So a paper by Reimers showed that non-deterministic methods, like random methods such as neural networks, cannot be sufficient to compare results because it's simply due to randomness or some hyperparameter tuning. And this is pretty typical in our field. And unfair or inadequate claims on state-of-the-art, for example, using more data, additional data, and saying we reached state-of-the-art, using data augmentation, comparing non-data augmented methods with data augmented methods, comparing to poorly implemented baselines, or maybe even implementing someone else's paper sloppily on purpose, or assembling of several methods. And novelty claims are similar. Every paper is novel nowadays. Something else we discussed is this, which is very relevant to why we are here today, this chronic allergy to negative results. So the publication bias is really, I believe, in emerging levels in our field. What I mean publication bias is that the phenomena occurring when the probability of a scientific study is not independent of its results, which is pretty bad because that's not how science should work, which leads to systematic difference in the findings of published tests versus all the tests. And this is nothing new, obviously. So this whole negative results, avoidance of negative results, it has been discussed in other fields such as medicine. For example, in clinical research, studies finding no difference between two study groups were less likely to be published than the ones found some difference. Even worse, some negative results being less likely to be published even if they provide corrections of those previously wrong research. And this is something similar, some similar recurring, let's say, phenomena or patterns I see in our community, and I just want us to discuss and acknowledge this. So this is based on, I think, our assumption that every single positive result is scientifically more valuable and interesting than every other negative result. That's, I think, we kind of assume in every paper, and that's a bold claim, I would say. So let's revisit that, right? So this whole outcome reporting bias may be due to authors, like coming from the author's perspective, or maybe it's just author's behavior due to the incentive of journals or conferences or the editorial preferences kind of cause this problem. It's difficult to, of course, pinpoint, quantize, quantify because those are kind of entwined, but these are basically the main reasons of this. And lack of traditional hypothesis construction, we believe, before conducting the experiments, and the lack of expectation to do so makes this worse. And when it comes to pre-registering, which we will, or let's say first start with consequences of this avoiding negative results. First of all, it creates a bias against disruptive, innovative ideas and favors incremental biases. I think this is a really big deal. We are all trying to make 89.5 to 90 or something like that in terms of accuracy or something. So no one is risking, because it's a risk. It shouldn't be a risk to try something a bit out of the ordinary, because you just can't get published with negative results. And it makes it harder to basically pinpoint the reasons why it worked, why it didn't work, and the causality of this whole thing. And it increases waste of resources. Imagine how many of us tried some idea, it didn't work, and if someone had written that it didn't work, maybe we wouldn't waste that much resource re-implementing stuff. And also, it's possible that a poor implementation is the reason why it didn't work. So if someone publishes a negative result, maybe it's a good thing that someone, hey, I want to re-implement this, I think this should work, and okay, there was some bug in the whole code or whatever, we can get something quite interesting out of that. So I believe we should be able to publish one way or another, discuss negative results, at least in our papers which had positive results. I mean, if I have written all of those papers too, if you look at all these papers we have been writing, it's as if that thing worked in our first try. Are you serious? That literally never happens. So what about all those cases that it didn't work? I believe we should report that. So what we proposed is basically pre-registration. So submission with a clear hypothesis and design of experiments. And I'm not talking about this pre-registration or this results blind review, just like, hey, this will just submit all kinds of ideas, crazy ideas, even if it didn't work, you will get a paper. I believe the review should be that this whole hypothesis forming and serious argumentation of why it should work really has to be there. So it's not like you just like throw crazy ideas and get a publication. The reviewers should immediately reject, even if that makes sense to the reviewer, reviewers should reject if the argumentation is not there. So it's not only about pre-registration, it's about hypothesis forming and argumentation. So this whole hypothesis forming can be, as I mentioned, extensive analysis of previous studies, mathematics, domain knowledge. And then you get your experiments and methods reviewed, and once accepted, the experiments are run. Then the paper gets published, basically regardless of the results. Something else we discussed is this whole in the wild illusion. So essentially, we are all using test set as a validation set. We are fitting to the test data. A paper published 1 year ago, basically they just created a new test set from CFAR 10. And the results dropped 4 to 15% in accuracy with respect to the current test set. This should get all the best paper awards. I'm serious, because they have the guts to call out on our bullshit in the research. I don't care if you're in your fancy single shot capsule net. And we should be talking about this. I think this is really big deal. I'm serious. I'm really serious. how many minutes I have?
Fine.
Yeah, great. Then something we finally talked about is this whole automated machine learning thing. So there have been recent results that search policies of neural architecture search, so trying to find better architectures with neural networks, are basically no better than random search. So basically, if you throw that much of computation, well, just do random search anyway, because it's as good as that. Another paper basically showing the same thing. These are quite recent papers, and I'm sure we published this in April. Since then, there have been others. So this is very much related to hypothesis, lack of hypothesis, because right now all these neural architecture search papers, they are finding an architecture and then trying to form a hypothesis. Oh, because there's a skip connection here, and they nowadays even do this like biologically plausible stuff, like, oh yeah, in the brain it also, no, it doesn't work like that. Talk to any neuroscientist. So this is pretty bad, I think. So interestingly, those found methods with neural architecture search are super complicated. So we are trying to, with AutoML, we are trying to simplify this whole thing, but then, yeah, it goes kind of the other way around. So wrap up. I think we should be able to talk about newer methods of, let's say, publication and review process. We are not claiming this is perfect and we should switch to this, but it would be beneficial to at least start discussing pre-registration and results blind review process. And we should be aware of this hypothesizing after the results are known as authors, as readers, or reviewers. And we should change this starting from a solution, often someone else's, to starting from the problem itself, I believe. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Oguzhan.
Thank you.
Do we have some questions from the floor? Yeah?
Your hypothesis for this paper, was it falsifiable?
Yeah, that we should have some serious numbers. We haven't done that, but it was more like a case study, actually. We digged in some papers. You can find HARK side of deep learning.
Sorry, behind you. Yeah.
What are the negative results? Okay, because previous speaker, he discovered something. I think it's important. At least it was interesting to me. You know,
Yeah.
automatic division between inanimate objects and so on. So, and he said he was not satisfied with it.
Yeah, so by definition, what I mean is that having a hypothesis that, okay, this will work, and negative result is that it didn't. But absolutely, so this word negative shouldn't have a bad connotation, negative connotation in terms of the quality of the research. That's what I'm trying to say. Thank you very much for asking this. So, and if you noticed, we had such nice discussions when some things aren't work and some things didn't work. For example, in the previous talk, people are interested to make it work. Isn't this a nice thing? And in life, in general, we don't only learn from positive examples, right? That's not how things work. We also learn from negative experiences and examples.
Is there a question?
Yes. Oh, as you admitted, this work of previous year should be best paper. Instead of this, we are sitting on the last day of the in the forest auditorium, actually. So
Yes. Good observation.
But you and previous speaker both stating something like that pre-registration should be really mandatory.
No.
Why? What negative result response, what negative impact are you expecting from making this mandatory?
So first thing is realistically it's not practical. So I believe the biggest problem right now we have in the whole review process is scarcity of good reviewers who has time. And even in this case where the results are there, reviewers are lacking, let's say, having difficulties understanding the paper and rejecting because they simply don't understand. So expecting them to put time on reading the hypothesis, the methods, looking at the argumentation, previous work, that I believe that would be unrealistic to put this as a mandatory thing. Also, there may be some backlash because it feels a bit of top-down authoritarian thing rather than let's start discussing, experimenting slowly, and maybe having, as previous speaker suggested, some side tracks starting from somewhere in every conference in this.
As far as I understand from your answer, you are, well, you're thinking about possibilities to fix the problem. You are thinking in terms of making the review of the pre-registration. Does it really necessary?
Well, reviewing papers in a pre-registration format would require more in-depth analysis due to the nature of it, because you don't just check the results, oh, it works. So this, what I mean is that you need more, even more good reviewers, which we don't have.
Yes, but why just not get it away? I mean, to make the pre-registration mandatory, but avoid the reviewing of the pre-registration except of some voluntary, I don't know, wiki-like comments like thing or something like that.
Well, I think even if you just pre-register your experiments, and then yet your preliminary study gets deposited, and then you're forced to publish it with your results, and the differences between it will increase the quality remarkably, because then you will have to document what did you think at the beginning and what came out at the end. And so you wouldn't need additional stage of reviewing. It would be better if you do two stages of reviewing, but even if you just needed to submit something like 6 months before, and then mandatory publish it with the paper.
Yeah, that's something I didn't mean there must be, let's say, there shouldn't be mandatory reviewing of the pre-registration and another reviewing. That's totally, I don't have strong opinions on that, but yeah, that makes sense in a way. So in that sense, what our questioner is saying that you don't need this another round of review possibly after the pre-registration. So on the other hand, the discussions should be very much deep. Why it didn't work, why it worked. So this is something to think on indeed. It's not an easy problem and easy solution.